our anthropology is not derived by human psychology or, empirical data from MIT or something like this. It's derived from the revealed aspect of what we see in Christology. And so there's no real way to diagnose man's problem and to understand man and man's anthropology, as I said, without the right theology. As you guys know, the way this Discord works, we allow the opponent to present whatever arguments he wants. He can have the floor for as long as he wants within reason. You can't talk for an hour. Go ahead.
Well, Mr. Dyer, I didn't really want to present an argument to begin with, rather just to clarify your position so I don't end up strawmanning you here. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. Do you concur with Basil the Great's understanding of the distinction between ousia and hypostasis?
Of course. Every Trinitarian has to hold to that.
Yes, I mean, there are, of course, different conceptions of the distinction. Like, for instance, Aquinas has a very different understanding of the distinction. He just sees it as relational. So,
well, I mean, the Orthodox Church is right. We don't hold to Aquinas. So, I'm Orthodox. Then, if you know that, you should know that I'm not going to hold to Aquinas' view of it.
There's different people who are heterodox in some respects. So,
is this Jake?
No.
It sounds like Jake.
No, it's not Jake. I'm definitely not Jake. Jake is more. I'm Salafi. He's very.
Okay, go ahead.
Very philosophical and.
Yes, so we do affirm the distinction between nature and hypostasis. So go ahead and present whatever argument you'd like.
Right. So, if I understand Basil correctly on this, the distinction between ousia and hypostasis is a distinction between the general and the particular.
That's one aspect of it. It's not reducible to that. That's one aspect of it, yeah.
This, from his letters, as far as I understand it, of itself is not what is the basis for Trinitarian monotheism. Rather, the unity of the energies is, because
no, that's just one signifier. No. That's just one signifier of the unity. The unity is the person of the Father. The hypostasis of the Father is the arche, principle, and fount, and source of unity in the Godhead.
Okay. But Basil says that the difference between the ousia and hypostasis is the difference between general and particular.
It's part of it. It's not reducible to that.
Well, can you explain what other elements are there?
Well, there's different ways in which there's many in God. There's many persons. There's many energies. There are different roles in the way that God operates in creation and redemption. For example, the Father does not become incarnate. So there's different ways we speak of different distinctions in God, right? So not everything in God is reducible to one and many or to general and particular. Yes, there is a relationship between the general being the common nature that the three persons share, the particular being three particular individuated persons. But hypostasis is more than that. It's not just reducible to the general and the particular. So you have to look at the totality of Basil's works. You can't just look at Epistle 38 or a specific section and say, oh, he's only saying that hypostasis means that.
Yeah, well, three men would have one nature and three hypostases.
It's an analogy. It's an analogy to the created order. He says many times over that the similarity between creatures and God is not identical in the fact that creatures are distinct when they're three separate hypostases.
Right, and as far as I understand it, the big distinction is that three different creatures would have completely separate energies, whereas in the Trinity understanding, they all have a shared energy.
No, you're confused, because in one sense, all human beings have the same energy because they have the same nature, but they have different energies in the sense that I instantiate human nature individually as an individual hypostasis. But in one sense, we have the same nature considered as actions of nature itself, or qua nature.
Okay, as far as I understand it, energies is not an element of it. It has nature as a basis, but energies are actions and attributes. So
correct.
If one man is 6 feet tall and another man is 5 feet tall.
That's
they
not an
obviously don't
energy.
have that
That's not
same
an energy is action proper to nature. Energy signifies what kind of nature. So if I build a house, that's an action proper to human nature. It signifies energy, the process of actually doing and building a house, right? But the energy is distinct from my nature. It's not identical to it. The energy of building a house is not identical to me. But there's an aspect of me in my energies. And so that's why we say the energies are personal. So the same way for God, God's actions are proper to divinity. They signify the divine nature. They're not identical to the divine nature, but they signify who he is, and he's present in every one of his actions or energies.
Now, I can bring up Basil's letter on this.
But I've read all of Basil's
Where he
letters.
says-
I'm not trying to be rude to you. I know what's in Basil's letters. I've read them all. I've read all of his works. They're in English.
Then you know that he does have a letter where he explains the distinction between ousia and hypothesis.
I just said letter 38 talks about it.
Okay, so, and he says it's a difference between general and particular.
And I
like
just said it is
humanity
that,
versus
and it's
human.
not reducible to that. Like, how do you not understand the distinction between admitting that yes, he talks
No,
about that? I've cited that on Twitter. I put it on Twitter a month ago that he says that. I'm well aware of it. Do you not understand what a reductionist move is?
But, well, I'm sure that there are other elements of it too. I'm saying this is the main ones he lists, but I'm sure that there are others. But I'm saying all of these elements, if you weren't a monotheist, let's say, for example, if you had a different religion that believed in 3 gods, they would use the exact same terminology. They would say 1 ousia, 3 hypotheses. And
No, you're just
it really would
misusing
be-
the quote because do you understand what analogical predication is? And your own Islamic tradition does the exact same thing, and then you turn around and say, "But you guys can't do it but we can do it."
Well, you also accuse us of saying that Allah doesn't resemble creation when Dionysius the Areopagite says the same thing in your tradition.
I don't know what you're talking about. He says in one sense he does resemble, which is the energies, in another sense he doesn't, which is the essence. So we have an essence-energy distinction. Your religion does not have that distinction. So I don't see how you can
But
say,
we're talking
in no
with-
sense.
You consider attributes to be nature, right?
Attributes are not nature;
energies.
they are energies.
Okay. So height, for example, would be an energy because
No,
that's an attribute.
it's not. What are you talking? You don't. That's an idiomata. That's a characteristic. Energy is action. Okay, you're talking about creatures having properties. Is not the same thing as an attribute. The way God has attributes. All you've done is confuse things that are proper to creatures with what we say about God, and it's the other way around. You can't say, for example,
Okay.
let me give you an example. So when the fathers talk about begotten, okay, everybody says, oh, then you're saying God has a temporal succession of creating a son. And so there's 2 gods. But it's not, it's an analogy to the way that it's similar is in the fact that there's a shared nature between the Father and the Son. The way that it's dissimilar is that God's begetting is not temporal. It's not another God. It's a distinction of hypostases. So again, you're just you're trying to take the dissimilarities and make them similar. It's not. Do you know what?
Dyer,
Do you know what univocal
a shared
predication
nature
is?
doesn't make somebody else somebody's son, or else the spirit would be his son too by this logic.
Okay, again,
So
you
that
don't know what
doesn't
you're
make any
talking
sense.
about. You're not listening to the point. Do you understand what an analogy is?
Yes.
So no, you don't, because your arguments are based on univocal predication.
Well, obviously, I reject univocity of being myself, so no. I
By the
can't
way,
stand
your
the
church
distinction.
your sect also rejects analogia. So you don't know anything about Allah because you don't have any analogical predication.
Now, before I can respond to this criticism, we have to clear something up. When we talk about God's attributes or properties, are those his nature or his energies?
Are you asking me, or are you talking about your position?
Yes, I mean your belief on this.
Yeah, you're just taking features of creatures like height and thinking that God possesses those things like.
We're not talking about creatures. We're talking about the Creator. Like different. We don't
Dude,
apply the
that
same
was
terminology.
your argument. You just gave this argument. You talked about height that creatures have.
Yeah, of course, because I understand.
That's not an attribute that the way that God has attributes. So you can't use that argument. It's a
Okay.
dumb argument.
So I'm not using this argument. I'm just saying, do God's attributes fall under his qualities, his attributes fall under his nature or his energies?
They are energies. I already told you this.
Okay, so God's attributes are his energies.
Correct.
So then, okay, so if what is the difference? Then his nature is his essence. Then it has nothing to do with his energies.
No.
That is-
There's a distinction between
Right, okay, so
essence and energy. Energy.
Peter says we become
All right,
take
so
on
dude,
God's nature.
what are you talking about? What is your argument?
In the Bible, in Peter's epistle, he says we join to God in his nature.
No,
What
the
exactly
word
is he
that
talking
the
about?
word there is talking about that we are made divine. It doesn't say how we're made divine. How we are made divine is covered in the rest of the text that talk about how we're made divine, which is by the energies.
But he uses the word nature.
It's just the word. Yeah, we participate in divine life, and so the energies come from the divine nature, but they're not identical to it.
So by nature, he means the essence?
No,
or
he means the energy.
Okay,
A lot. When you read the New
nature is
Testament,
properties, though, right? When we say nature, you mean, when you're talking about God and you say nature, you mean his qualities and properties, right?
God doesn't have qualities, so I don't know where you're getting
Like
this.
love, I mean.
It's not a
love
quality.
And that,
There are not.
love
God has
and
no
justice
qualia. He
and-
has no accidents.
whichever term you prefer, would you say that is
So
quality?
maybe
then,
you should learn
that Peter
learn
here-
about the theology before you try to come debate it, because I don't think you understand what we say. So can I tell you what we say first before you try to create
Absolutely.
a word trap
Absolutely.
here? So the energies of God are just simply God's manifestation of himself to creation, to the created order. They're not only manifested to the created order because obviously he eternally possessed love, he eternally radiated glory. So they're not just created, but when we're speaking of them in terms of redemption, typically we're talking about his manifestation to creatures. So we would say God's actions, his attributes, even the logi are types of energies. So there's different types of energies. Some are eternal, some relate only to the created order. But everything that we know about God is manifested to us energetically, all of them. Even the attributes, you can talk about attributes, but even the attributes ultimately are energetically revealed to us. So that's it. And the analogy that we make, listen, an analogy means there's an aspect of similarity and there's an aspect of dissimilarity, right? The similarity is limited. So when we talk about God's love, it's similar to human love. When we talk about God's energy, it's similar to the way that a man builds a house, right? A man takes his blueprints in his mind and he constructs the house according to what's proper to human energy. He puts his energy into that. The action and energy of building the house is distinct from the person themselves. But that action or energy is manifesting or proper to human nature, just as all human actions are. So we say there's a distinction between the action and the nature that produces that action, or the person that has the nature that produces that action. But that doesn't mean that it's a one-to-one correspondence, that everything that's true of the creature is then applied to God. How do we know what's applicable to God and what's not? Well, that's where theology comes in. Theology tells us the way in which analogy is applicable and isn't applicable, right? So in one sense, yes, we can predicate positively, cataphatically things of God because he's revealed them to be so. God is like us in that he possesses attributes like being a father, like being merciful, like being a judge, like being provident, right? All of these things are similar to the types of things that humans do, but obviously he infinitely transcends those things too because he's uncreated, right? He's not temporal. He's atemporal. Even though he can act in time and space, he transcends even the positive predicates, and that's why we make a stress on apophatic theology. So when we use words like cause, the Father as the cause, it doesn't mean temporal cause. It doesn't mean beginning in time. We mean and say over and over that he's eternally the cause of the Son. He's not eternally the cause of the world. And this is Athanasius' whole debate with the Arians to distinguish between the eternal begetting of the Son and the creating of the world ex nihilo in time. So I'm just trying to tell you that we make clear where we make positive predication and where it stops.
Very good. So then the question is, are qualia nature or energy?
God doesn't have
for
quality.
God?
I don't know where you're getting. God doesn't have qualities. He doesn't have qualia.
He doesn't.
No.
Okay. So mercy isn't a quality.
Mercy is an energy.
Okay. So he's merciful would not be correct.
So can I so your theology is literally ripped from a couple atomist and primitive Aristotelian sources. All of that theology is ripped from the Greeks. You import it into the early Islamic tradition, and that's all you have, right? Are you an occasionalist?
Jay, Mr. Dyer.
All right. He's not going to answer. He's gone.
Just,
all right.
I don't accept any of the Ashari use of the Greek thought. It's very very, very different.
I mean, you're talking about qualia. You're talking about qualia, so I don't know where you get this idea.
Don't be careful. I mean, I'm not here coming saying, your theology is this and that. I mean, I might say that in other contexts, but in a debate, I maintain a level of civility. I don't go, you're just a bunch of pagans and things like this, because this is not a correct way.
I didn't say you're a bunch of pagans. I'm talking about the early development of your philosophy. You're trying to do philosophy right now. So you're saying I don't do philosophy. You're trying to do philosophy, talking about qualia. That's from philosophy, right?
Philosophy is obviously can be very ambiguous. By philosophy, I mean falsafa, obviously.
Okay, where does the notion of qualia come from? Do you think that the Quran is the beginning of the discussion of qualia?
No, I use this because it's more familiar to you. Obviously, the correct terminology, from my perspective, is asma wa sifat. His names, his being and his names. These are his naming qualities, or however you want to particularly translate that as. But I don't agree with the introduction of Greek thought into Islamic theology. That's something that I oppose in my aqidah. The idea of people having qualities or characteristics is not something that the Greeks invented, or that.
Okay, so do you agree? So do you affirm?
Not to be rude, but the term isn't qualia. Qualia doesn't have to do with qualities. Qualia is a technical philosophical term in philosophy of mind that means the qualitative, subjective experiences of what it's like.
Well, it has to do with sense data, right? And he's talking about the properties of created beings, and he's thinking that the characteristics or properties of created beings is the way that God possesses. So he thinks that a property is identical to an energy.
Look, just to be clear, you understand that I don't subscribe to any Platonic conception of being.
I didn't say you're talking about.
Subscribe to the work of. I know, but I mean, when you're talking about this distinction where you just have the like the phenomenal and the nominal, distinction between quality and essence.
I don't make the. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude to you, but where did anything to do with Kant come up in this? I'm not. Look,
because you said empirical, because somebody can have a characteristic that's not empirically identifiable. Like somebody, for example, can be a very good person without any empirical data on that. They could have good intentions. These are called the unseen, and there can be unseen qualities. So
I don't understand how this relates. How does this relate to what we're talking about? I'm lost.
Well, when I said qualities, you corrected that to quality, and then later on you clarified and said that God doesn't have qualities within Orthodox theology.
So again, qualia is a very broad thing. You can go back to Cicero. I mean, this is an ancient term that's broad. I don't know what sense you're meaning it here. So what you referred to was properties or attributes or characteristics or idiomata, right? Like I have a snub nose, and so therefore I'm going to say that if I predicate that of God, then that's an energy. No, me possessing a snub nose is not an energy. All I was trying to do is tell you that what you're calling idiomata or characteristics are not the same thing as energies.
Okay, very well. So if we're clear, then when we talk about God's nature, the way Peter referred to it, he meant his energies, not his essence, correct?
No. Again, you're haggling over a term that's just talking about the way that we're united to divinity. It's through the energies.
Well,
because nobody teaches that we're united to the essence of God. So if you're trying to use that as a proof text that we're teaching that you're united to the essence of God, no, nobody says that.
No, of course. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to clarify the terminology because I think you'll agree that clarifying terms is very important. I mean, this is a huge issue in a lot of ecumenical councils, how terms have to be used. So I have to understand when you say nature, like the way Peter says nature.
Okay, but what you're not aware of is that not every term in the New Testament is the same and identical later on in the conciliar usages. Okay, so there's different senses at the time of the biblical writers when they, for example, talk about hypostasis. After the Cappadocians, hypostasis takes on a more technical and nuanced sense.
I see. So you're saying that Peter uses it to mean energies, but in a general sense, later theology, it's more specifically means essence distinct from energy.
No, it's no different than if I said we're united to God. Okay, and then well, how are we united to God? Are we united to God's person? Are we united to God's energies? Are we united to God's essence? Right? I would specify later on, and that's what happens in the clarification that Orthodox theology does later on. It specifies how we're united to God, or to the divinity, or to the divine nature, and how is the energies. So let me tell you something. So first of all, listen. First of all, we don't believe the Bible contradicts, okay? So you can find a verse here that you can set against the rest of the teaching of Scripture that will appear to contradict, and every heretic does that, right? We believe in a holistic canonical interpretation. So I'm going to look at all of the texts that talk about the energies, which is dozens of texts in the Old Testament and the New Testament, that's going to inform how I interpret 2 Peter. I'm not going to take 2 Peter out because it uses the word ousia or phusis and say, oh, that only has one meaning in one sense. That's the word concept fallacy. You don't just take a Greek word out of the New Testament and say it only has one meaning, therefore I've sort of collapsed or contradicted Orthodox theology. It doesn't work like that. There's a whole debate for centuries. And by the way, at the time of Nicaea, the way hypostasis is used is clarified after Nicaea, and it takes on a more technical sense. Go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Dyer, I'm not trying to pull like a gotcha or anything like that. I mean, there's no point in that. There's nothing beneficial from that.
I don't believe that you're not trying to pull a gotcha, but go ahead.
Well, if you don't, then at least keep it to yourself rather than making some sort of negative insinuation about me.
You're obviously in here as a Muslim to debate, so to come under the pretense that you're not here to debate is dishonest.
I was asked by a Christian to come here to talk.
I don't have any control over that. So do you want to have an argument?
I'm not here to give you a hard time. I mean, I can, but I'm not going to do it in this context in your own server, like talking to you, like.
Well, I gave you the floor. So, again, you can have the floor again. Present whatever you want.
Okay. So, since it seems like this term is somewhat ambiguous.
Which term?
Nature.
So, again, your own theology, even if I don't exactly know every nuance of your Salafi system, but I assume you have some kind of apophatic theology. Most of Islam does.
You'll find that our theology is very different from other theology. Like Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, doesn't believe that the Quran is eternal. There's a big difference. Yeah, well, I mean, there's a million different, schools of Islam, I know. So there's not apophatic theology. I mean, no, not really. Rather,
okay. So Allah does bear a similarity to creatures, then, for you.
I wouldn't really call it a similarity.
Well, the Quran says he bears no similarity. So which do you affirm?
Yeah, I'm being very carefully because I have to be certain what you mean by terms. But if we say, for example, that Allah exists.
Well, you tell me what it means when the Quran says he bears absolutely no similarity to creatures.
I will, inshallah. So when we say like something exists, we generally mean like it has like spatial dimension and temporal existence. Like if we say Winnie the Pooh exists,
so that's something that applies to creatures, right?
Yes, but when we say like
so that's an analogy. So now you've brought Allah down to creatures.
So, when we say Allah exists, we obviously don't mean the word is completely different. Like when we say Winnie the Pooh exists,
so if it's completely different, then it doesn't tell you anything about Allah. That's what I've been saying for months.
If you want to give me the floor, then let me finish, and then if you find any things like objectionable,
you just said it's completely different, which refutes the whole point.
Mr. Dyer,
is it completely different or not?
If you're in good faith, then let me explain it. But if you don't want me to,
you have the floor. Explain it. But you're not going to sophistically talk around it. Explain that objection.
Okay. If I have the floor, it means I can talk for a minute or two.
If you're gonna debate me about debating, we're not gonna do it. Explain the argument.
So, when we say that something in creation exists, we mean it has temporal duration and spatial dimension.
Yeah, you already said that.
And we would say it doesn't.
Yeah, we already covered that.
Exist.
Right.
So, but we say that Allah exists, yet He doesn't have any spatial dimension or temporal duration.
Yeah, so that's absolute dissimilarity.
Yes. So there's no.
Okay, so it doesn't tell you anything about Allah.
Well,
Yeah, so the whole thing doesn't work. That's what I've been telling you for months. I don't know why you guys can't get this argument. It's a very simple argument. How do you know anything about Allah if that's the case?
Well, it's very simple. We know what he says. Now, if you're
No, that's not an answer. That's not an answer to the objection. We know what he says. You just restated the position. How does that explain the objection?
Okay, Mr. Dyer, correct me if I'm wrong. Please do. But you
Just
yourself
make the
don't
argument.
think that-
Stop using my name. This is not neuro-linguistic programming, dude. Just make your argument.
You don't think that he has any spatial dimension or temporal existence except for the incarnation either, do you?
I think that he does bear a similarity to creatures. That's what analogical
Do you think
predication
he
is
has
based
spatial
on.
Spatial dimension or temporal existence?
There's a
Apart from
similarity
the
in, yes, there's a similarity to the things in creatures like love,
you
like
think he has
mercy.
space- You think he has width and depth?
No, again,
That's correct.
your response
Okay,
is
so
based
it
on
does-
univocal predication. No. The
So when
the
you say
energies
he
do
exists-
come down to us. The essence does not.
You mean it? He exists in a way completely different than when we
No,
described.
it's not
Because when
complete.
we
It is not completely different. It's analogically the same and different.
Well, would you agree that when we say something exists, in a normal sense, we mean that it has spatial dimension and temporal duration?
We don't have to use existence. Talk about Allah's mercy. Talk about any of the other 99 names. Aren't they likened to creatures?
But you have to start from the predicate.
No, I want you to talk about the other. No, because you can sophistically get around the existence argument, which I don't. I mean, actually, I don't think you consistently can. But what about mercy? What about love?
Well, our mercy and love are hormonal sensations, and
No.
obviously there's
When it
no
okay,
predicate.
so when it says Allah is merciful,
Yes.
okay,
It
what
doesn't
is
mean that
the?
he's experiencing a hormonal sensation?
Dude,
of
I know
mercy.
that nobody is attributing to God created properties. But when you name and predicate of God, you're using created concepts and words. That's the whole point. But your argument, your system says that there's no similarity between Allah and creatures in any sense. And so all of the predication that you use, the 99 names, don't work. They don't tell you anything. It's a very simple argument.
I just pointed out, though, your theology agrees on this.
No, it does not. That's the essence
As a matter
energy
of fact-
distinction. I don't know how many times I have to tell you this. Dionysius doesn't. No, he teaches. No, he doesn't. He teaches the essence energy distinction in divine names very clearly. He says the processions. No, he doesn't. He says the processions come down to creatures. Yes, he does. I've read the divine names. He says the energies are likened to creatures. Do you want me to go get the chapter and show you where he likens the created, the creatures to? Yeah, because I know what Dionysius says.
Mystical theology says, like, even to
I'm
call
talking about the
God
divine
one,
names,
or to
dude.
say that-
The divine names. What you're talking about is what's true of the essence of God. We believe that you can't predicate positively of the essence of God. So how do we know God? Letter 234 of Basil. The energies come down to us. It's the same thing that Dionysius calls the processions, and he even uses energies in the divine names.
Again, let's just keep it simple. He says you can't even ascribe existence or oneness to God according to him.
The essence. Do you not understand that he himself makes the essence energy distinction?
Of course, this is his main contribution.
Yeah, so the things that we can't positively predicate refer to the essence. The things that we can positively predicate refer to the energies.
Good. Okay. So, do you to make it clear?
How many times do we have to make it clear?
In Islamic thought, qualities like merciful are different from actions.
How is that answering the question of predication? I'm making a very simple argument to you about predicating about Allah, and your own system qualifies and says you can't positively predicate of Allah because he bears no similarity to creatures. If he bears no similarity, then your words and your concepts, which are creatures, don't tell you anything.
Why don't you say it again?
Okay, yeah, exactly.
You're asking if
So you don't have an answer to that objection. You're just going to talk around it.
are actually within Islamic theology as acts, or as energies as they're called in Eastern Orthodox theology, are known to his creatures. Obviously, like if he destroys something, we can see that that's known to us. His
How do you know about Allah? You're just talking around the objection. How do you know about Allah in your system?
we know him by his actions.
But they're not anything like creatures, right? When you predicate about them?
his,
Right.
his quality.
Yeah, exactly.
Essence,
Is the Quran a creature?
No.
The Quran is not a creature. So the book's not a creature.
The Musaf is obviously his words. If he says something, that's not a creature because it's an articulation with his voice.
Okay, is his voice eternal and uncreated, or is it created?
His voice is uncreated, but
Wait a minute. So Muhammad's voice is uncreated?
But when he articulates something,
Well, you just said Muhammad's voice is uncreated. So a creature's voice is uncreated.
he said his, evidently referring to
All right,
Allah.
no, you're done.
So-
No, yeah, you're done. No, I asked you specifically about when the Quran is revealed, when it becomes written down, when it becomes a book. Is that a creature? Is the book a creature, or is it uncreated?
A Musaf, a writing of the Quran, is obviously a creature.
Okay. There's no similarity between the creatures and the uncreated in your book. So you don't know anything about Allah.
So you actually concur with
Okay,
this, though.
we're done.
You say the only thing you know is by.
No, I explained we don't concur with that. We don't deny analogy. You do. So we're not going to do that cycle again because he's trying to trap us. By the way, he said he wasn't going to come to trap us. He tried to trap us. I don't know how many times we have to tell him that we are saying two things. Analogical predication relates to the energies, not the essence. Nobody can possibly predicate of God's essence. Hence the essence energy distinction. His system does not have an essence energy distinction like our system. Hence why it's not a problem for us. And he's just going to keep repeating that same argument. And yes, like Sam Shamoon said, that guy's a waste of time. Next up, who's up? Do you notice that he doesn't address the objection? The Quran says no similarity. He just goes through all these texts, tries to deflect to our position. Won't talk about the argument. There you go. Anyway, it's open for him.
Focuses on one quote to the exclusion of others. Takes things out of context. Mr. Dyer. Mr. Dyer.
It's open for him. Anybody else can speak up.
Hello? Anybody? Bring some of these iconoclasts on here.
Well, there's a lot of people in the chat talking smack, but they won't come debate. People are like, why are you mean? I'm not being mean. It's just we don't allow people to do sophistry, right? So you can't deflect and talk around the arguments and avoid the objection. No, address the position, address the argument. If you want to come on, I gave that guy the floor at the beginning. Do you remember that? I said, you can have the floor. You can talk as long as you want. And by the way, every time we do that, they don't come and present an argument. They ask a question, and then I respond, and then they say, you won't let me finish my argument. Dude, you could have the floor. You could talk for 10 minutes if you want. I'll give you 15, 20 minutes. You can make all the arguments you want. But they won't do that. Anyway.
Yeah, I posted a link to the Discord about 10 times on the YouTube chat, and nobody's joined from it.
Yeah, I mean, anybody's welcome to come and but see, look, I can tell when an argument is being made and somebody is skirting it. If you've done enough debates, you can tell when people are doing that. Okay, so the intensity is because I'm not going to put up with the people skirting the point that's being made. And he just kept going back to, but you believe that apophatic theology is true. Yeah, but not for the energies. But Dionysius says that you can't predicate of God. Yeah, of the essence. I mean, it's not even controversial. Just read the divine names. He teaches the essence energy distinction clearly in the divine names. The Logos is the icon of the Father, and man is the icon of God. We are the image of God.